Okay, we're here to reveal your Premier League worst signing of the season. Pascal, there's some big money signings on there. Who stands out for you?
I think it's Sterling for me. I mean, I know he's still very young and he might grow into a better player, but I think what he had been doing at Liverpool, quite exciting, getting into the England setup as well and playing, quite well at international level. But he's taken a massive step back for me this season at Man City. You compare similar sorts of money spent on him and De Bruyne. De Bruyne has been a bit of a star for Man City this season, but Sterling's gone the other way. I didn't really love Sterling at Liverpool. I was sort of always a bit harsh on him, I think, whenever I sort of talked about Sterling beforehand, but I think the way he plays, I don't really enjoy watching Sterling play personally. I think too often he just dribbles down cul-de-sacs, like he often gets crowded out by defenders. Not scored enough goals this season. He's done alright against some. He scored that good goal, that solo goal against Bournemouth, but I think he does okay against sort of the worst teams, but against better teams, I always think he gets completely overshadowed in those big games. I think he's had a really, really bad season. I think it's quite a long road back for him now if he's going to really become a key player for Man City. Especially, it'd be interesting to see obviously Guardiola coming in, different sort of coach, whether he can sort of have an effect on a player like Sterling, because I think Sterling certainly needs some love, because he really has had a really bad season, I think. And the other one for me would be Benteke. I think for Liverpool he's had a couple of okay moments recently, got a couple of goals, but over the course of the season to get completely Origi go ahead of him, Sturridge as well. Obviously, I think Benteke was a bad signing for them, and I wouldn't be too surprised if he moved on this summer.
Yeah, I think those are the two biggest money signings on the list, and they have both been really disappointing for their respective clubs. Do you agree with Pascal there?
Yeah, I'd have to go Sterling as well. I think he's got 11 goals in total, which is not too bad. 6 in the Premier League, but I think 3 of those or 4 of those came in one game, didn't they? I can't remember in the season he played. And I think after the contract stuff for Liverpool, you have to be really careful if you're going to do that and you're going to make yourself that sort of person. You're going to have to go to a big club and perform week in, week out. Otherwise, you make yourself look a little bit foolish. And I think he's made himself look that, because he's asked for more money. He wanted to go to a bigger club. He's gone to, I wouldn't say a bigger club, but for more money, that's for certain. And a club that's challenged him for the title, and he's not performed. Pascal mentions as well the other players in there. Benteke, I think it's been disappointing. I'm actually quite a fan of Benteke. I think he's a threat, but he's never really sort of settled. I think Firmino started playing up front as well, didn't he? Ahead of him, Sturridge has been out. I say Origi's obviously injured now, but he's been in there as well. And other players on there, Falcao, I think the main one. I think Falcao for a couple of seasons now. Such a shame, because when you saw him at Atletico Madrid and Porto, I think his latter Porto days and early Atletico days were the best you saw of him. He was probably the best striker in the world at that point. Disappointed at Manchester United. Chelsea, he's never really got a look in, and obviously Pato's in there as well, another Chelsea player, and it's been a poor season for Chelsea, and there's been some unfortunate and poor signings this season.
Yeah, Falcao's been in the last couple of seasons now, and it is a shame, because how can you go from such a good player, which he was, every club in the world wanted him, to just not being able to get in the team. Obviously he's had big injury problems, but there's bigger problems than that for Falcao, isn't there? He's just completely gone off the radar, fallen out of it. I'd say Memphis Depay personally is right up there for me, just because I think I had such big expectations for him. I thought he was really going to do well in the Premier League this season. He obviously player of the season in Holland last year. We've seen a lot of players come over from Holland who have got a great record over there and not do too well in the Premier League. Some of them have come over and done really well. I expect him to be the latter, but he just hasn't done it, and he quite quickly out of the team, hasn't really performed well in any Premier League game that I can remember. His best performances have come in Europe. He did have one game, I can't remember who it was against, but it was one game, I think it was FC Midtjylland actually, in the Europa League, where it was fantastic. It was one of the better wing performances I've seen in recent years, but that was a very, very rare high moment. I think when you look at Benteke, he's had his high moments as well. The goal against Manchester United is a fantastic strike, the bicycle kick, but he's, as you mentioned, he's fallen probably 4th in the pecking order now, behind even Roberto Firmino, who's not even a recognised centre forward. So just the way he doesn't really fit into the Klopp style, does he? Slows play down a bit too much, and even when he's on the pitch, Liverpool don't really cater to him by putting balls into the box. They still try playing in the Klopp style, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave the club this summer. Other names on the list, Julian Lescott, I think a lot for off the field stuff as well as on the field stuff. Obviously Aston Villa have had a disastrous campaign. Lescott came in, personally last summer I thought he might be a decent signing. He's got a lot of experience, but then he comes in, he hasn't done himself any favours with the fans, with the tweet with the car, which he said was accidental, and then after they got relegated said it's the weight off their shoulders and stuff like that. Any other names on there? Niasse for Everton hasn't really got a look in since.
Yeah, I was going to say about Niasse. $13.5 million I think it was in January they signed him for, and considering the way Everton have tailed off this season so badly, he didn't really get a look in, to be fair. He played in a couple of cup games and then come on a sub right at the end of matches, but he started the last couple, and the one against Leicester just last weekend, he was absolutely awful in that game, so bad in that one. It was obviously a really tough game for Everton going there at Leicester's title party and all that, and none of the Everton players turned up, but Niasse was so quiet, took a few poor touches, And yeah, he's got a lot to prove. 13.5 million. It's not like they've just sort of signed someone on the cheap in January who might be sort of a squad player. They've spent quite a lot on him there, 13.5 million. So he's got a lot to prove. I mean, we've got Ed Air on there at Swansea. Came in at Swansea, did absolutely nothing at Swansea. Gomez started the season quite well. And then they brought in Pulowski, who's scored a couple of goals himself. But Ed Air's just completely gone and it just done absolutely nothing. So they're those two players. I think Depay, he was probably maybe the biggest disappointment. Like I said, I think we all sort of thought he'd have good things. And a lot of us all had him in our fantasy teams at the start of the season. Thought he'd do really well, but he just did absolutely nothing. But for me, just how much of a backward step Sterling has taken, and the money as well, 50 million. I mean, I know he's a young player and he still has a lot of time to grow, but just so poor this season for me.
I do think Sterling's got a few things in his favour. I wouldn't say he's had, judging him just without the price tag, I wouldn't say he's had a particularly poor season. I think he just hasn't lived anywhere near to the 50 million price tag. I don't think personally he's been much worse than a Jesus Navas at Manchester City. And so, in terms of all-round performances, I wouldn't say he's the worst on the list, but when the price tag comes into it, he certainly should be up there. So should we see who the readers have voted, Matt?
So it's the top four. In fourth place with 8%, we've got Christian Benteke. Third place, quite a surprise, Raheem Sterling with 13%. Second place is at Memphis Depay with 19%. And top of the list is a massive 47%, Radamel Falcao.
That is an interesting top four, that. Pascal, what do you make of it?
Well, yeah, Falcao, big surprise. I think he might have even won this award last season, maybe, because of how sort of ineffective he was at Manchester United. I think obviously Chelsea, they've brought him in on loan, and he hasn't really done much. I certainly don't think he's the worst signing there. I mean, just going back to, obviously Sterling's come in their third there. I mean, the point you made there about Navas, but Sterling, for 50 million, you should be able to make yourself, I think, a regular starter, and he hasn't done that. Navas is now sort of preferred player at the moment. Man City there, but the others, like we've said, we've talked about Benteke. You said about him dropping to fourth in the strikers pecking order there. Depay, like we said, so ineffective. But when you say Sterling, say you compare it to Martial, who's in our best signing category, because he has sort of similar sort of expectations. Those two, both very young players, whereas Martial has really sort of taken it on and become a key player for Manchester United. Sterling's gone the other way, so that's why it's certainly good to see him in the top three. I mean, I would have had him at number one, but
all those are relatively big name players who aren't really first choice for their team at the moment. Another thing I'd say in defence of Sterling, I think he's a decent player for Guardiola. I think he can really change things. He's the type of player, you think back to that season Liverpool had when they were challenging for the title, that was the sort of football Guardiola likes to play in terms of high pressing and high octane stuff, and Sterling could be capable of that. He's still got a lot to prove, of course, but what do you make of that top four? Falcao,
I'm quite surprised that Falcao's up there, not too surprised the other ones. I think the point I make on Depay is he's obviously come in for a lot of money, and he's had some poor games, like you mentioned. In Europe, he's had some good games, but I think it's important to remember he is still young. He's got a hell of a lot of talent. He's had obviously some poor games. I think he just needs an arm around his shoulder just to tell him, it's going to be all right. You're going to make something of yourself. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think it'd be a real shame if a new manager came in, or Van Gaal stayed at United and sort of left him on the bench, left him out of the team, because I think he needs a confidence boost. He needs to be put in the team, and someone to say, you can be a big player for us, and I think he will be. Falcao, 47% is massive, and it's unfortunate, but he's gone away. He's something rotten, and he's tailed away.
So by quite a distance, Radamel Falcao is your worst signing of the Premier League season.